And I want to go now to Alina Polyakova, a Russian foreign affairs expert and the president and CEO of the Center for European Policy Analysis, along with retired U.S. Army Major General James Spider Marks. And General Marks, I just want to begin with you. I've been talking about this fighting in Bakhmut. Russian forces clearly are depleted there. You're not just hearing that from Kyiv. It's visible on the front lines. So we understand Russia's sending more of these airborne troops and that they're going to put them there. Now, I know you've had a lot of experience dealing with Russian airborne troops in your time in Europe. So what does that say to you?
Well, the Russian airborne troops they paint themselves, just like American airborne troopers, as a pretty elite group. And let's be frank, it is. It's an additional step, and it's an additional qualifier that's required in order to join that unit. But once that unit is planted on the ground, their capabilities are not dissimilar to other units that would be there. They just, in many cases, would get there by jumping out of the back end of an aircraft. In this case, in Bakhmut, they won't do that. They'll deploy by trucks or by other means, or they'll walk in. But what I think it demonstrates is that with the airborne troops there, it really is a reinforcement. I don't see this as a relief in place. In other words, that the Wagner group is going to withdraw and then that the airborne troops are going to take their place. That is although it seems very simple, it's a very complicated military operation so that you don't create gaps and vulnerabilities. But I think what the Russian forces are trying to achieve is that this is where they want to make a stand. These airborne troops are there, and this is where they intend to fight. And we've seen what the images look like, and we see what the reports in terms of losses on both sides.
Absolutely. And obviously, the incredible loss that this has been for Russia. So if they're putting in more elite forces, what that says in all ways. We also saw, of course, Alina, the recruitment video, right, that Prigozhin put out. And, in this context, anyone who is now opposing the war in any way, we're seeing more and more response to it, right? Whether being in prison or poisonings or falling out of windows. And I want to play more of what Elvira told us about how concerns for her safety worry her and even for her parents. Here she is.
I have absolutely no guarantee for my safety from an objective standpoint. The most important thing is that there are two hostages in this country, my own parents. They're in a completely different city. There's a rather broad range of actions that could be applied to them. I know a lot of people who don't share the Kremlin's views, and they have no guarantee of safety because the repression machine is rolling along with maddening speed.
And of course, Alina, she says that they were able to confirm that there were, 4.5 milligrams of this poison in her system. What does this say to you about how bad things are for anyone who speaks out in Russia right now?
Well, Elvira's case is certainly, absolutely heart-wrenching, but unfortunately, it's not unique. As you've reported many times on your program, Erin, the list of those who speak out against the regime, who call Russia's war in Ukraine exactly what it is, which is a war, now face really increasingly brutal consequences. It's harassment of your family. Nothing is really off the table. Children are being taken from their parents. In the case of that in Russia as well, of a little girl who drew a picture at 12 years old of a Ukrainian flag with the word war in the picture, and she was basically taken from her father. It's really approaching a state of repression, censorship, and just, really deep, I think, dictatorial type tactics that look very much like a place like North Korea or Belarus. This is what Russia is today, and the risk of speaking out is incredibly high.
And General Marks, and Alina talks about repression, Elvira also told us about how bad the repression has gotten as she sees it there, talking about what they will do to track down any critic. Here's what she said about that.
They come to some people at 4 a.m. They come to do searches, knocking down doors with sledgehammers. They ransack, turning the whole house over in an attempt to find some documents discrediting the authorities, or I don't know, to find some opposition signs.
General, this is what they're spending time doing, day in and day out, knocking on doors 4 a.m. with sledgehammers.
Doesn't sound much like a republic, does it? It sounds very much like the Soviet Union that we grew up with for 40 to 50 years. Look, there's criminality across the board in terms of what the Russians are doing in Ukraine and to their own people. There's no form of dissent. And then when you take this to a military perspective, What young man or woman, what young man in the Russia case would want to fight for this type of an autocratic regime where it's feckless leadership? It simply is a matter of following orders and not understanding the purpose of what you're trying to achieve. It's blind loyalty, which is very, very dangerous.
And Alina, the context here is there's now some reporting, this is from Bloomberg, that the U.S. is ramping up its investigation of Swiss banks that they say may be helping Russian oligarchs evade sanctions, right? So we're more than a year into this war, and you've still got Swiss banks possibly essentially assisting oligarchs if this is how this pans out. We know Switzerland is long a playground for Putin's inner circle. The reported home of his ex-wife, Ludmila, was there, right? You could see it from Davos, where the world's elite met recently. The Wall Street Journal says that Putin's girlfriend, mother of his children, Alina Polyakova, lives in a high-walled mansion near Geneva, or certainly has at one point. And Switzerland even acknowledged nearly $50 billion of Russian money in Swiss banks. That's what they're acknowledging. How big is this, I guess, this safety zone, Alina?
Well, exactly as you said, I mean, Swiss banks in particular have a reputation, and they've been quite notorious because of the kind of anonymity they provide to their clients in being known as a safe harbor for dirty money, money that is being laundered, money that is stolen, in this case from the Russian people. And it's been a known fact that many Russian oligarchs who are trying to stay safe, basically, and keep their money out of the hands of their own country, out of the hands of Mr. Putin in particular, have been hiding it in Europe, but particularly in Switzerland. Unfortunately, there are many Western financial institutions that are likely involved in this. Switzerland is really the hotspot for it. But I think what's really different now is that the Department of Justice is taking this very seriously in a way that we haven't seen before. And to the extent to which they're also investigating Western wealth managers for potential wrongdoing.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, right? And how serious these sanctions are more than a year after this invasion. Thank you both so very much. I appreciate it.